And we have got major breaking news in the state of Wisconsin tonight. NBC News projects Janet Protasiewicz has defeated Daniel Kelly to become the state's next Supreme Court justice. Her victory gives the court a liberal majority for the first time in 15 years. That new majority will determine the future of abortion access in the state, a major win for abortion rights advocates. Or, as the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party put it earlier, quote, "This election was a release valve for 12 years of Democratic rage in Wisconsin about Republicans rigging our state and smashing our democracy, and then using that power to rip away our rights."
That was MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle from 5 months ago after the surprise upset win of Janet Protasiewicz on the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Welcome to today's video. I am your host, Eric Darnley Small, and the title of the video is in part a conversation I want to have on where the liberal movement is going. And I want to make a distinction about what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm talking specifically about liberals and the liberal movement. Politically, the liberal movement has been championed by politicians like Bernie Sanders and members of the Progressive Caucus like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Squad, Pramila Jayapal, and others. And the win in Wisconsin is being framed as a liberal win, not necessarily a Democratic win. The judge during the campaign challenged things like redistricting and abortion access, which are core to the liberal movement. And you could almost be forgiven for not recognizing that there is even a distinction between liberals and Democrats. Much of the news today, particularly in the House of Representatives, is made up of the antics on the radical right MAGA Republicans. Indeed, the party almost caused us to shut down the government over the weekend. That political intrigue and infighting on the right has taken up all the political oxygen. So much of what is being reported on what's happening on the left is absent. But there is an internal struggle going on in the Democratic Party that nobody's really talking about. And it's centered around the direction the Democratic Party is going, as opposed to where it's coming from. And in particularly, there is a war happening between liberals and everybody else in the Democratic Party, whether you want to call them centrists, you want to call them blue dog Democrats, whatever you want to call them, there is a struggle going on. And there are two things that kind of make you go, just in the last, I would say, 6 months or so. One is, of course, everyone probably knows that former Democratic Senator Kristen Sinema switched parties and is now an independent. And she's always been sort of on leaning towards the right in her voting and in her movement. But she, let's not forget, was a so-called progressive when she went into the House and later into the Senate. The second thing that's curious that I don't think is getting a lot of reporting, but, Business Insider reported this, is that in the House over the weekend, there was reports that Republicans passed a bill that was strictly for funding the military, and it stripped the first black Secretary of Defense. His salary was stripped to $1. It was voted on unanimously by Republicans, but also 2 Democrats voted for this outrageous move pushed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I'll get into the challenges facing the progressive movement in my next video, but I want to talk about this one issue just right now because it's so new. It's September 29th. As you can see here, this is on the left Golden, on the right is the Secretary of Defense, first black Secretary of Defense. And I want to just quickly mention, here is the response. Here is the reporting that nobody else is reporting on. Democratic Rep. Jared Golden of Maine voted for a bill on Thursday that would reduce Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's salary to essentially nothing. But Golden, a centrist Democrat who represents a swing district and has a history of bucking his party, is standing by his vote. I doubt Lloyd Austin, he says, is spending much time thinking about that. Golden told Insider on Friday, if he is, then he shouldn't be in that position. Austin currently makes $235,000. Golden also noted that he previously voted against a waiver to allow Austin, a former active duty member of the military, to serve as Secretary of Defense, a civilian position. The second person to vote, again, this is a Marjorie Taylor Greene bill, but it says, nonetheless, all but two Republicans voted for the bill, so it wasn't unanimous among Republicans. And they were joined by two Democrats, Golden and Rep. Marie Goosecamp Perez. She's very new to the House, whose office did not respond to Insider's request for comment on her vote. The duo also voted for House Republicans' version of the National Defense Authorization Act, a separate bill pertaining to the military that included, get this, provisions targeting the teaching of race and healthcare for transgender service members. So just to be clear, and just to put a final point on this, these are two Democrats in a time where the votes of two Democrats, of two of anybody, could swing a piece of legislation one way or the other. These two Democrats chose to side with Republicans in a historic move, as far as I can tell. It's unprecedented, that would cut the salary of the first black Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, to nothing, to essentially $1. To prove a point, for what reason? It makes absolutely no sense. But they joined Republicans in this, and they're proud of it. As far as we know, this guy Golden is proud of it. And he is, or not Golden, but I think his name is Golden, of Maine. He's proud of this. Perez, I don't know. She's young. And I seem to recall when she ran, she was like a sort of a blue collar sort of gal. But talking about race in the and what's going on with race, DEI, and all this kind of crazy stuff that the Republicans are targeting, these things are extremely important to progressives. So this position to take is absolutely a shot across the bow to progressives, right? This is not a Democratic issue. This is strictly a shot across the bow by Democrats to progressives, to saying, we're going to support Republicans on this. Now, you could say that they knew that this wasn't going to go anywhere, and it's not going anywhere. The Senate is not going to take up this appropriation bill for the Defense Department. But it is an indication of the fact that not all is hunky-dory amongst Democrats. It is still a party that has a lot of fissures and a lot of difficulty to work out going forward. So don't be surprised in the next election when people are like surprised at what happens and that there's infighting and all these kinds of things. But however, I want to table that because this video is going to be about the biggest wins by the progressives within the last 6 months or so. And it begins with the story that I started with in Wisconsin. And I want to take us back to 2016, to what was once a fairly reliable Democratic state, at least for the presidential elections. Let's not forget, Wisconsin was a part of the so-called blue wall Hillary Clinton was depending on in 2016 to give her the win for president. And as we know, the blue wall collapsed and Donald Trump, Wisconsin voted for Donald Trump, as did Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the other parts of the blue wall that collapsed. But if you go back even 11 years, Wisconsin could fairly be compared to Florida today. It was a place where Democrats had become comfortable winning and seeing a reliably purple-leaning blue state. Democrats thought that demographics as well as politics of the state would keep the state in their hands for years. Wisconsin was comfortably for Democrats primarily because of its very strong union membership. Unions, for the most part, are the constituents of the Democratic base. The union engine is one that drives the Democratic voter effort, the money effort, the organization, and overall enthusiasm of the Democratic Party in the state and in all states all over. So it's no surprise that Republicans hate unions. And so in 2010, Republicans nominated a guy by the name of Scott Walker, and he ran for governor on a Republican ticket, and he won. This is a guy who was backed by big donors and corporate interests like the Koch networks. And his job was to take on the unions and break them. And that's exactly what he did. Governor Walker stripped the unions of much of their rights that had protected them for years. He also instituted so-called right-to-work laws, which allowed non-union labor throughout the state. It was a move so controversial that the Democrats tried to recall the governor the very next year. And I want to show you this clip. This is from 11 years ago. It's the PBS NewsHour. It's been edited for time, but it gives a sense of how serious and how unprecedented and how angry the voters of Wisconsin, as well as the state unions, were with Scott Walker, that they tried to recall the governor, something that's very difficult to do in all states and is somewhat unprecedented. And it fails most of the time. I mean, the successful ones, I think most famously was in California, that got us Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. But Scott Walker's attempt to go after unions, public sector unions, was so egregious that the Democratic Party just, along with the unions, just pulled out all the stops and went after Walker in this recall effort. Take a look at this video from 11 years ago.
I feel like I'm in Vegas. We're here all week.
Virginia Link took vacation from her state job to set up shop along a city street.
You know, you can download petitions online.
Gathering signatures to recall the governor and lieutenant governor.
I have a 13-year-old car, and Walker's telling me I'm a have. I'm not a have.
Walker has lied to the people of Wisconsin, and he is destroying our state.
I want to take on a petition to recall Governor Walker.
Fort Atkinson voter Julie Wells hand-delivered the official recall filing to the state elections board.
We're going to do this. We're taking back our state.
For their part, Republican Party officials say Governor Walker's leadership will prevail.
He's not afraid of this battle at all. Not at all.
Then you want to check your city, where you're from, Cudahy, or...
But veteran campaign operatives claim the so-called ground game being worked for this recall effort is as good as President Obama's 2008 campaign operation, only more energized. Party-paid professionals man recall offices across the state. It's a ground game that takes a lot of money. Some estimates suggest a recall election of the governor and lieutenant governor could cost $80 to $100 million in campaign spending. The state Republican Party says, quote, we'll have what we need.
We'll spend enough to make sure the governor's message is out there and that people understand what this is really about. And for him, this is truly a time when good policy is good politics.
But even in Democratic strongholds like Madison and Milwaukee, there are staunch Scott Walker supporters.
It's a fraud. It's a scam because the voters chose Walker.
My issue is that I think Scott Walker should be applauded for what he has done.
Committed to working together.
Governor Walker started talking to voters with new TV spots this week, saying his budget balancing policies are working.
I think we are doing the very best thing that Wisconsin has seen in probably a generation.
The fervor on both sides is just heating up. At a Recall the Recall event featuring Republican budget writer Robin Voss, an interloper disrupted the message. Both sides can claim unsportsmanlike behavior or worse. But a new St. Norbert College WPR poll shows a majority, 58% of respondents, including a growing number of Republicans, favor Scott Walker's recall. Petitioners have 60 days to gather the required signatures to trigger an election. An historic political exercise that, like the events earlier this year, will have all eyes on Wisconsin.
So that recall effort 11 years ago went down in crushing defeat. Democrats, Scott Walker handedly won the governorship and remained there for the next 2 years. His win made him a rock star on the right, similar to Ron DeSantis or Glenn Youngkin today. Scott Walker was a model and a hero amongst Republicans nationwide and across the state. I seem to recall the governor went to other states, other countries, other places, talking about and championing his win over the progressive movement. And over Democrats throughout the country and throughout the world. That's how much of a hero he was for the conservative movement around the world. And he was so popular, Walker thought that he could run for president in 2016 against Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. But he realized the errors of his ways and, withdrew his nomination 2 months after, because it was clear Donald Trump was just dominant on the Republican side. Walker then tried to run for governor once more and was defeated by Tony Evers, the current Democratic governor of the state of Wisconsin. But during Walker's reign as governor, he and the legislature passed a number of controversial laws. As mentioned earlier, there was the union-busting law that turned Wisconsin into a so-called right-to-work state. But also, Wisconsin began gerrymandering the state so that it was difficult to remove the governor, and it ensured the legislature would have majorities for years to come. It's so bad that the current governor, the Democratic governor, cannot pass any bills or veto any bills without it being overridden by the veto-proof majority in the state. So effectively, the legislature runs the state instead of the governor. There is no governor, basically. But it gets even worse, actually. As soon as the conservative legislature and the governor were in place, they immediately began putting judges in the state courts that were conservative and would support their very radical political views. So the courts were able to uphold the radically gerrymandered districts based on a 5-4 breakdown, 4 liberals to 5 conservatives. That brings us to 5 months ago. The Democrat had slowly began winning back power and favor since the failed recall years ago. The push to end abortion rights gave a shot into the arm of the Democrats nationwide. It helped propel Evers into the governor's office. And 5 months ago, it flipped that conservative court from 5-4 conservative to 5-4 liberal. Outside of the failed red wave, there are not a lot of political earthquakes, political earth-shattering moves that have happened in politics over the last, 6 months or years, 6 months or a year. But this win is seen as one of those bellwethers, one of those truly extraordinary wins. With a new judge on the bench, immediately the Democrats began filing lawsuits against everything from the anti-abortion measures to the gerrymandered maps, insisting new maps be drawn. But just to show you how toxic this race was, this is an edited clip from the concession speech and I want to remind you, this is a judge talking. This is not a political actor. This is a judge speaking. And this is his so-called concession speech, the right-wing opponent that Judge Protasiewicz won against. This is his response to conceding to the winner of the election. Again, not a politician himself. He is a judge.
Now, this didn't turn out the way that we were looking for. And I think there are a couple of reasons for it, and I think we need to address them head on. And it brings me no joy to say this. I wish that in a circumstance like this, I would be able to concede to a worthy opponent. But I do not have a worthy opponent to which I can concede. This was the most deeply deceitful, dishonorable, despicable campaign I have ever seen run for the courts. My opponent is a serial liar. She's disregarded judicial ethics. She's demeaned the judiciary with her behavior. And this is the future that we have to look forward to in Wisconsin. I've been committed to the rule of law my entire career. We could have the rule of law or the rule of Janet. And the people of Wisconsin have chosen the rule of Janet. And so I respect the decision that the people of Wisconsin have made. But I think this does not end well.
Wow. I mean, just wow. I don't think you've ever seen a more bitter, a more toxic response to a loss by a judge, not a professional politician. This is a judge. I just want to remind you, right? This is somebody who should be above the law, should be above reproach, should be the blindfolds over the head, over the eyes. That's who a judge should be able to see both sides, have moderating views. But it was extraordinary. But to show you how absolutely terrified the Republicans have become, this is a clip from the readout. MSNBC, this is from 3 weeks ago. Jason Johnson gives a brief rundown on what the legislature is planning to do to stop the Supreme Court justice from taking their power away. And as extraordinary as the other clip was about a judge, this is equally extraordinary that the legislature is trying to do. Take a look at this.
The voters. Today, Senate Republicans gathered to discuss their options for impeaching her if she does not recuse herself from redistricting cases. They claim she can't be impartial because during her campaign, she said that the current congressional maps are rigged to benefit one party, which is true. Here's the thing. Those statements do not meet the standard for impeachment or recusal. How do we know? Well, right-wing Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Rebecca Bradley once compared abortion to slavery and the Holocaust. We talked about it on this show. Nobody impeached her for that. Just yesterday, a state judiciary disciplinary panel rejected complaints about the comments from Protasiewicz. But that doesn't really matter because Republicans have their own unprecedented plan to impeach and block Democratic Governor Tony Evers from replacing her. How? They could vote to impeach the justice but not convict. We're going a little schoolhouse rock here. If impeached, she would have to immediately stop performing her duties as a judge, effectively sidelining her without actually replacing her, leaving a deadlocked Supreme Court. And guess what? They've got the votes to do that because of a gerrymandered supermajority. See how these things connect? The threat of impeachment is being used by Republicans all across the country right now. In Georgia, they want to remove Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis. And in North Carolina, they're trying to remove Anita Earls, the state's only black female Supreme Court justice, for speaking out about racial bias in the court.
So if you think that these people can be reasoned with, that these Republicans can be reasoned with, I think you're probably haven't been paying attention, particularly to what's going on in the House, because that's exactly what we've got going on in the state. It's the same mentality, the same thinking, the same behavior. And this idea of impeaching just to hold this judge in limbo because it would prevent her from doing anything, and at the same time it would prevent Tony Evers from being able to put somebody else in that position. When you look at what the legislature did during Walker's tenure, drafting laws that would pour power into the governor's office to prevent Democrats from passing legislature or from having any power over governing, and then when the governor lost his election, immediately took back all that power, you see that the Republican Party, not Donald Trump, again, one of the things I have to constantly remind people, particularly who watch this channel, who watch this video, one of the things you are not going to hear from me is that this is a Donald Trump problem. Donald Trump saw an opportunity within the Republican Party and used it. He saw, I believe, desperation amongst conservatives because he knew their party was dying. Their ideology was dying. and that they could not win elections anymore because their ideology became toxic to the American people. And Donald Trump saw that desperation and used it to his advantage. Vladimir Putin, the same. So, and this is evidence, this is further evidence that they are absolutely desperate. They cannot pass laws anymore. They do not believe in democracy anymore. They do not believe in turning over power anymore. Wisconsin, just like in the House of Representatives, is evidence that liberals are winning and they're scared to death. They can no longer rely on conservatism because conservatism has been a failure. Some believe that the attempts to remove and impeach this judge on an opportunity to rule is going to be as unsuccessful as the recall 11 years ago. So this attempt by Republicans to impeach her and hold her basically in limbo for the next however many years till the next election is going to fail because the people of Wisconsin are going to be against it. Remember the recall and the response by those supporters of Scott Walker, that this is an attempt to take power by the other side. I have a feeling that there's a lot of people in Wisconsin that are going to feel the same way about this judge. She won, as you saw in the clip at the beginning, by 10 points almost. I believe that was exactly 10 points, maybe 9 points. But at the end of the day, this is a good news story for Democrats and liberals in particular. To win back full control of the legislature by Democrats, to give power back to unions and to give a voice back to the people would be a huge win for Democrats and for the nation at large. And the fact that Republicans know that, and the fact that Republicans are frightened about that, the fact that Republicans are desperate and they're on defense is a huge win for Democrats and for progressives. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. You can support this show. I don't do super chats, but I do PayPal. You can support the show by going to paypal.me/VTIPENT. And as I mentioned before, if you like the show or if you would like to see more of these videos, you can like and subscribe by clicking the bell, giving a thumbs up and like and subscribing. As well, you can reach out to the show at my Mastodon me, which is mastodon.vtip.me/@Eric. I think I'm going to create a Mastodon strictly for these videos so that folks have it and you can reach out particularly on and comment both in the YouTube channel, and you can comment or send me links, send me other information, things that you think I should talk about in the Mastodon channel for this show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've had fun. I'm sorry, I was supposed to start live streaming and start new episodes in September. September was a month for me, and unfortunately I was unable to do it. As you can see, I am slowly building out this studio space, I guess you could call it, and I'm slowly getting material for that purpose. It is a work in progress. Again, reach out to me on Mastodon, Mastodon me @Eric. If you have suggestions on what I can do for my background, which I do not like, yellow background, I'm not even going there as to why it is the way it is. However, thank you for watching. And thank you for watching this entire video, and I will see you on the next one very soon, I promise. Thank you.